You're too poor to be here." The words cracked across the courtyard like a whip, and every head turned. Ethan Whitmore stood inches from the old biker's face finger, jabbing the air, his wife laughing behind a manicured hand. The man in the dusty leather vest didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just lit a cigar, slow and easy, and looked at the screaming millionaire, the way a man looks at a child throwing a tantrum. What nobody in that crowd knew, not Ethan, not his wife, not the manager rushing over to take their side, was that the broke biker they were about to humiliate owned the very ground they were standing on. Before we go further, do me a favor. If you love a story where arrogance finally gets what it deserves, hit that subscribe button and stay with me all the way to the end, because the ending of this one will stay with you. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I genuinely love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's get into it. The Harley came through the gates of the Silver Ridge Coastal Club at 2:15 on the hottest afternoon of the summer, and the first thing people noticed was the noise. Not loud. That was the strange part. Travis Reed had ridden 400 miles across the Nevada desert, and the old machine still rolled in soft and steady, like it was tired but proud. He eased it past the valet stand, past the row of polished German cars, and one long white Rolls Royce that gleamed like a tooth, and he killed the engine right there in the middle of all that money. I was a big man, 68 years old, blonde hair gone pale at the edges, shoulders that still filled out the leather even after all these years. His skin was burned brown from the sun, his boots were cracked, his jeans had a hole in one knee that he'd never bothered to fix because he liked them that way. And the people sipping champagne near the entrance looked at him the way you'd look at a stray dog wandering into a wedding. "Is he lost?" a woman murmured. "Somebody should call somebody," her husband said. Travis swung his leg off the bike, stretched his back until it popped, and reached into his vest for a cigar. He didn't notice the stares. Or he noticed and didn't care which was closer to the truth. He'd stopped caring what rich people thought of him a very long time ago. That was when Ethan Whitmore decided to make him care. Ethan was 39 in a way that came from a machine dressed in linen that cost more than the biker's motorcycle was worth. He'd been standing by the rolls with his wife Vanessa holding court for a small circle of people who laughed at his jokes because of who he was, not because the jokes were funny. And when he saw the dirty old biker park that filthy machine 3 feet from his car, close enough to scratch it in his mind, something in him lit up. Something mean. "Hey," Ethan called out. "Hey, you." Travis lit the cigar, took a slow pull, looked over. "Yeah, you grandpa. You can't park that thing here." "It's parked," Travis said. 2 words, calm as still water. That answer, that flat, unbothered answer, did something to Ethan that 1,000 polite responses never could have. His circle of friends went quiet, waiting to see what he'd do, and Ethan Whitmore was a man who could not stand being watched and not respected at the same time. "You don't get it," Ethan said, walking closer now, and his voice climbed loud enough for the whole courtyard to hear. "This is a private club, private, members only, and members don't show up looking like they crawled out of a gas station dumpster." A few people laughed, nervous laughs, but laughs. Vanessa was loving it. She stepped up beside her husband, 29 years old and dripping in jewelry, and she made a big show of waving her hand in front of her nose. "Oh my God," she said. "Babe, I can smell him from here. Is that gasoline or just..." "Pour..." The laughs got louder. Travis took another pull on his cigar. He'd heard it all before, every word of it, in one form or another. He'd heard it from bankers in 1981 when he walked into a loan office in boots and they told him to use the service entrance. He'd heard it from a country club in 2004 when he tried to take a meeting and a man exactly like Ethan told him the help waited outside. He'd heard it his whole life, and somewhere along the way he'd learned the most powerful thing a man can do when small people are trying to make themselves feel big. Nothing. He learned to do nothing. "You're too poor to be here," Ethan said, and he said it slow, savoring it, like the line was the smartest thing anybody had ever come up with. "That's the bottom line, old man. You don't belong with people like us. So get on your little toy and ride back to whatever trailer park you came from." Vanessa clapped, actually clapped. And still, Travis Reed said nothing. He just looked at the young man with those pale gray eyes, and there was no anger in them. That was what unsettled the few people paying close attention. There was no anger and no fear and no hurt. There was something almost like pity. You think I'm gonna cry, Travis finally said, voice low. Son, you're not the first rich kid to mouth off at me. You won't be the last. Go enjoy your party. He turned to walk toward the bike like the conversation was over. That was a mistake, because Ethan Whitmore could not let a man turn his back on him. Not in front of people, not in front of her. Hey, Ethan grabbed the biker's shoulder. The courtyard went dead silent. Travis stopped. He didn't turn around right away. He looked down at the manicured hand gripping his vest, and a few people who knew about men, really knew, felt the temperature drop. There are men you can put a hand on, and there are men you cannot, and the smart ones know the difference at a glance. Ethan Whitmore had never in his life learned to tell the difference because his money had always done the telling for him. Take your hand off me, Travis said quietly. Ethan let go, but only because his pride needed it to look like his idea. He stepped back and threw both arms wide for the crowd. You see this? You see this guy? This is what's wrong with this country. Some loser who never made anything of himself, never built anything, never earned anything, thinks he can roll into a place like this and breathe the same air as people who actually did something with their lives. Babe, you're so right, Vanessa cooed. I built a company, Ethan announced to no one and everyone. 41 million in revenue last year, 41. And this guy's net worth is probably whatever's in the gas tank. He laughed at his own joke. The crowd laughed with him. Travis turned around then, slowly, and he looked at Ethan Whitmore for a long, long moment. 41 million in revenue, Travis repeated. That's right. And how much in debt? The smile froze on Ethan's face, just for half a second, just a flicker. But Travis caught the way old men who've spent 50 years reading other men always catch it. And in that flicker, the biker learned something about Ethan Whitmore that Ethan himself was working very hard to never think about. None of your business, Ethan snapped too fast. No, Travis agreed, it's not. But he'd seen it, and he filed it away. By now, the noise had drawn a crowd, and the crowd had drawn the manager. His name was Gerald Pruitt, and he came hustling across the courtyard in a too-tight blazer, sweating the kind of man who'd spent his whole career deciding which guests mattered and which ones didn't, and getting it right just often enough to keep his job. He took one look at the situation. The elegant millionaire, the beautiful young wife, the small army of expensive friends, and the dirty old biker who smelled like a service station, and he made his decision in about a second and a half. Sir, Pruitt said, planting himself in front of Travis, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. Is that right? Travis said. This is a members-only establishment. If you're not a member or the guest of a member, you're trespassing, and I'd hate to have to involve the authorities. Pruitt's voice was greasy with the particular politeness men use when they're being cruel and want to seem reasonable. So if you'll just collect your vehicle and be on your way. Call them, Ethan cut in. Pruitt blinked. Sir, the authorities. Call them. Have his bike impounded. Have him arrested for trespassing. Ethan's eyes were bright now, drunk on it. Let's show this old fossil what happens when you don't know your place. Vanessa gasped with delight. Yes, oh my God, do it. A murmur ran through the crowd, some of them eating it up, a few of them, just a few, starting to look uncomfortable. One young security guard standing near the wall, a kid maybe 24 named Marcus, shifted on his feet and looked like he wanted to say something and didn't dare. And Gerald Pruitt, the manager, looked at the screaming millionaire and the silent biker, and he reached for his radio. I'll call security to escort him out, Pruitt said, and we'll contact. You'll want to wait on that. Travis said it so quietly that Pruitt almost didn't hear him. Excuse me. Travis reached into the inside pocket of his vest. Not fast. Slow and deliberate, the way you move when you don't want a nervous security guard to get the wrong idea. And what he pulled out was not a weapon, and it was not a wallet. It was a phone. An old one, scratched, the kind a man buys and keeps for 10 years because it works fine and he doesn't see the point. He dialed a number from memory, pressed it to his ear. And while 60 people watched, Ethan smirking, Vanessa filming on her phone, Pruitt sweating, Marcus, the young guard, holding his breath, Travis Reed said exactly 6 words into that phone. Bring the documents downstairs, all of them. Then he hung up. That was it. No threats, no raised voice, no explanation. He just slid the phone back into his vest, took a pull on his cigar, and leaned against his motorcycle to wait. Ethan laughed, but it came out a little thinner than before. Documents? What documents? What is this, a magic trick? He looked around at his friends. Guy's gonna pull out a coupon for the early bird special. A couple people laughed, not as many as before, because something had changed. Nobody could have told you exactly what. But the biker's calm had stopped looking like the calm of a man who'd given up and started looking like the calm of a man who knew something the rest of them didn't. And there is nothing on this earth that rattles a confident man faster than another man who isn't afraid of him for reasons he can't see. Mr. Pruitt, Travis said, how long have you managed this club? Pruitt didn't want to answer, but the question had a weight to it. 6 years, he said. 6 years. Good run. Travis nodded slowly. You ever meet the ownership? The ownership group is private. They operate through a holding company, Reed Capital. We deal with their representatives. Reed Capital, Travis said. Funny name. Pruitt's face did something complicated. A flicker like Ethan's earlier but slower, a thought trying to be born and getting strangled at the crib. Reed Capital. The man's name is, what's your name? Pruitt asked. His voice had changed, just a little. You're asking me now, Travis said, and for the first time the faintest ghost of a smile touched the corner of his mouth. After you decided I was trash. After you decided to call cops on me. Now you want to know my name. Don't engage with him, Ethan snapped at the manager. He's a vagrant Gerald. Do your job. But Gerald Pruitt was not listening to Ethan anymore. Gerald Pruitt was a man who had survived 6 years in a job built entirely on knowing who mattered. And somewhere in the back of his skull, an alarm had begun to ring faint and far away like a phone in another room. He looked at the old biker leaning against the battered Harley. He looked at the cracked boots and the burned skin and the hole in the knee of those jeans. And then he looked at the eyes, those calm, patient, unafraid gray eyes, and the alarm in the back of his skull got louder. Sir, Pruitt said carefully, your name. Travis, the biker said. Travis Reed. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than before. Before, the silence had been the crowd watching a man get humiliated. This silence was the sound of one man's stomach dropping through the floor. R. Reed, Pruitt repeated. That's right. As in Reed Capital Holdings, Travis said, like he was confirming the weather. The holding company, the one your ownership group operates through. He took one last pull on the cigar and dropped it, crushing it under his cracked boot against the spotless flagstone. I started it in 1986 with $11,000 and a motorcycle. Different motorcycle. This one came later. Ethan Whitmore laughed. Loud. Too loud, the laugh of a man who has built his entire life on the certainty that he can read a room and who is suddenly horribly unsure. Oh, that's priceless, Ethan said. This bum thinks he owns the place. You hearing this, he thinks he's a billionaire. Buddy billionaires don't ride into a country club covered in dirt with a hole in their pants. That, said Travis Reed looking at him steady, is exactly why they never see me coming. And from across the courtyard beyond the fountains, in the champagne, in the row of polished cars came a sound that turned every head and stopped every heart. The chime of the private executive elevator. The one that only went up to the top floor of the tower. The one no member had ever ridden because it didn't serve members. The door slid open, and Gerald Pruitt, manager of the Silver Ridge Coastal Club, watched 3 men in dark suits step out, men he recognized, men he had only ever seen in video calls. Men whose names he had been told to remember and never to bother. And behind them, the chairman of the board of the company that signed his paychecks, carrying a leather folder against his chest like it was something holy. Pruitt heard a small sound come out of his own throat. Ethan Whitmore was still talking. He hadn't seen the elevator yet. He was still in the world he'd been living in 10 seconds ago, the world where he was the most important man in the courtyard, and the dirty old biker was a joke he was telling to impress his friends. And another thing, Ethan was saying, if you really own this place, which you obviously don't, Vanessa grabbed his arm. Ethan, you'd have the decency to at least dress like Ethan. Her voice had gone strange, high and tight. She wasn't filming anymore. The phone hung forgotten in her hand. She was staring past her husband at the 4 men in suits walking across the courtyard, and her face had gone the color of the champagne in her glass. Ethan finally turned around. He watched the lead attorney, a silver-haired man with the bearing of someone who had never once in his life been told to use the service entrance, walk straight toward them. Toward him, Ethan thought for one last beautiful second. Surely toward him. The attorney walked right past Ethan Whitmore like he was a coat rack. He walked right past Vanessa. He walked past the manager, past the friends, past 60 staring guests, and he stopped in front of the dirty old biker leaning against the battered Harley. And he did something that made the entire courtyard understand all at once, in a single terrible instant, exactly how wrong they had been. He bowed his head just slightly, the way you do for a man you respect more than anyone you've ever met. Mr. Reed, the attorney said, and his voice carried clear across the silent courtyard, I apologize for the delay. We came as fast as we could. He opened the leather folder and held it out. The acquisition paperwork is ready for your signature, sir. Everything's in order. We just need you to sign. Travis Reed didn't take it right away. He looked at Ethan Whitmore at the open mouth, the drained face, the eyes that had finally far too late begun to understand. He looked at Vanessa, who had stopped breathing. He looked at Gerald Pruitt, who was already calculating exactly how much of his life had just come apart and finding the number too large to hold. Then Travis Reed reached out and took the folder. Thank you, Daniel, he said to the attorney. Sorry to drag you down here on a Saturday. He glanced at the cover of the documents, and that ghost of a smile came back just for a moment. Turns out it couldn't have happened at a better time. He looked up, found Ethan's eyes across the silent courtyard, and held them. You said I was too poor to be here, Travis said. Ethan's mouth moved. Nothing came out. Say it again, Travis said quietly. Go ahead. Everybody's listening now. Ethan Whitmore could not say it again. The words that had felt so good in his mouth 10 minutes ago, you're too poor to be here, had turned to ash. He stood frozen in the middle of the courtyard, 60 pairs of eyes on him, and for the first time in his adult life, he could not find a single thing to say. His brain, which had always been so quick with an insult or a boast, had simply stopped working. Cat got your tongue, Travis asked. There was no cruelty in it. That was almost the worst part. He said it the way a man talks to a kid who'd been caught lying, disappointed, a little tired, not even angry. A minute ago, you had plenty to say. You said I never built anything. You said I never earned anything. You said I should know my place. He tucked the leather folder under his arm. Tell me, Ethan, where exactly is my place? Ethan's mouth opened, closed. I'll wait, Travis said. Vanessa recovered first because Vanessa had always been the one who recovered first. She put a hand on her husband's arm and turned on the smile she used for waiters and valets and anyone she'd decided she needed something from. Mr. Reed, she said, and her voice came out sweet as syrup. This is all just a terrible misunderstanding. We had no idea who you were. If you'd known I owned the place, you'd have been nice to me. Travis nodded slowly. Yeah, I figured that's how it works in your world. He looked at her with those calm gray eyes. That's the whole problem, sweetheart. You only know how to be kind to people you're scared of. Vanessa's smile flickered. You weren't kind to me 10 minutes ago, Travis went on, because 10 minutes ago you thought I was nobody. And here's the thing about people like you, you'll never understand this, but I'll say it anyway. The way a person treats a nobody is the only honest thing about them. Everything else is performance. He glanced at the crowd. You two have been performing your whole lives. I just happened to be the audience that didn't clap. A few people in the crowd shifted. One woman near the fountain looked down at her own glass like she'd suddenly remembered something she'd said earlier. Gerald Pruitt found his voice then, though it came out strangled. Mr. Reed, I had no way of knowing. The protocol for unrecognized guests is I was just following procedure. I was doing my job. You were doing your job, Travis repeated. Yes, sir. Your job was to call the police and have an old man's motorcycle impounded because a rich customer didn't like the look of him. Travis let that sit in the air for a second. Is that the job? Because if that's the job, Gerald, then I've got some real questions about who's been training my staff. The blood drained out of Pruitt's face. My staff. The word landed on him like a brick. He'd spent 6 years believing the owners were a faceless holding company in a tower, and now the holding company was standing 3 feet away in cracked boots, and the holding company had just watched Gerald Pruitt try to throw it off its own property. I want to be clear, Pruitt said quickly, desperately. I never said anything personally insulting to you, sir. I was professional the entire time. It was these two who... You hid behind them, Travis said. That's worse. Pruitt shut his mouth. The lead attorney, Daniel, cleared his throat softly. Mr. Reed, do you want to handle the signing now or... Give me a minute, Daniel. I'm having a conversation. Travis didn't take his eyes off Ethan. 41 million in revenue. You said that. Pretty proud of it. Ethan swallowed. Yes. Whitmore Holdings. We're in commercial real estate and I know what you're in. Travis tapped the leather folder under his arm. You want to know something funny? You want to know why I came here today? Personally on a Saturday, riding 400 miles through the desert, when I could have sent any one of these gentlemen to handle it. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't want to know. Every instinct in his body was screaming that he did not want to know. I came because of this folder, Travis said. There's an acquisition in here, a company my people have been looking at for 8 months. A real estate outfit that overextended itself, buying buildings at the top of the market, took on a mountain of debt to do it, and started missing payments about a year ago. He pulled the folder out from under his arm and looked at the cover almost lazily. Company's about 3 weeks from going under. Couldn't make payroll last month. Took a bridge loan from a lender that doesn't forgive late payments. You know the type. The courtyard had gone so quiet you could hear the fountain. Ethan Whitmore's face had changed. The arrogance was gone now, replaced by something raw and animal. The look of a man who has just felt the floor shift under his feet and doesn't yet know how far the fall goes. What's the name of the company? Ethan said. It wasn't really a question. His voice had gone flat and small. Travis opened the folder. He looked down at the top page. He read the name out loud, slow and clear, so everyone in that silent courtyard could hear every syllable. Whitmore Holdings. Vanessa made a sound like she'd been hit. Ethan's knees actually buckled. He caught himself on the side of his white Rolls Royce, one hand flat against the door, and he stared at the old biker like the man had reached into his chest and shown him his own heart. No, Ethan said. No, that's not. We have a deal in place. We have a buyer, Reed Capital. They the term sheet. We signed a term sheet. You're buying us. You're bailing us out. The deal closes Monday. The deal closes when I sign this folder, Travis said gently, and I haven't signed it yet. The full horror of it crashed over Ethan all at once. Travis watched it happen, watched the man do the math, watched him realize that the dirty biker he'd spent 10 minutes humiliating in front of 60 people was not just the owner of the club, was not just a billionaire, but was the one single human being on earth who held the entire future of the Whitmore family in his hands. The mortgages, the houses, the cars, Vanessa's jewelry, all of it borrowed against a company that was 3 weeks from the grave, and the only thing standing between Ethan Whitmore and total ruin was the signature of a man he'd called too poor to breathe, his heir. Mr. Reed, Ethan said, and now the syrup was in his voice now. He was the one performing, and Travis could see every gear turning behind his eyes. Mr. Reed, I am so deeply sorry I was out of line, completely out of line. I'd had a few drinks. It was the heat. That's not who I am. That's not the man I am. Anyone here will tell you. Anyone here will tell me you've been buying their silence with dinner invitations for years, Travis said. Don't do that. Don't stand there and tell me who you really are. I watched who you really are for the last 10 minutes. You showed me for free. Please. The word came out of Ethan cracked. Mr. Reed, please. I have employees. 62 people work for me. If this deal doesn't close, they lose their jobs, their families. And for just a moment, something in Travis's face shifted. Because that was the only thing Ethan could have said that landed. 62 families. Travis had started with $11,000 in a motorcycle, and he had never once in 40 years forgotten what it felt like to be a man worried about a paycheck. Ethan saw it. Ethan saw the crack and lunged for it like a drowning man. Yes, Ethan pressed. Yes, think about them. This isn't about me. You don't have to save me, but those people did nothing wrong. They have kids in school. They have mortgages. They do, Travis agreed quietly. And that's the only reason I'm not walking away from this right now and letting you drown in the debt you built. He looked at Ethan with something cold and clear. But don't you dare hide behind those 62 people. Don't you dare use them as a shield 5 minutes after you used me as a punchline. Because I promise you, son, those 62 people would be embarrassed to watch you do it. Ethan's mouth closed. Here's what's true, Travis said, and he said it to the whole courtyard now, not just to Ethan. I was going to save this company. The deal was good. The people are worth saving. The buildings are worth holding through the downturn. My people did the work, and the numbers made sense. And I came down here personally to sign it, because I do that for deals that matter to me. He paused. And then I parked my bike, and a man I'd never met decided that the cheapest, easiest thing he could do with his afternoon was humiliate a stranger he thought couldn't fight back. He let the folder fall closed. So now I've got a problem, Travis said. Because the man I'm about to be in business with, the man I'd be tying my company's name and money to for the next 10 years, just showed me exactly what he does when he thinks no one important is watching. He shook his head slowly. And that's the one thing I can't buy my way around, Ethan. I can fix a balance sheet. I can restructure debt. I can carry a company through a bad year. But I cannot fix a man who treats people like garbage the second he thinks they can't hurt him. That's not a business risk. That's a character problem. And character problems always cost you in the end. Vanessa stepped forward. She was crying now. Real tears, though Travis suspected they were tears of fear and not of shame. Mr. Reed, I'll do anything. We'll do anything. We'll apologize publicly. We'll donate. We'll make it right. Just please don't stop. Travis held up one weathered hand and she stopped. I want you both to listen to me very carefully because I'm only going to say this once and then I'm going to sign or not sign and you're going to live with it either way. The courtyard held its breath. I grew up poor, Travis said. Not regular poor, the kind of poor where you learn the sound of the repo truck. My dad worked 2 jobs, and we still lost the house when I was 9. I rode a motorcycle because it was the only thing I could afford to fix myself, and I spent the first 30 years of my life being looked at the exact way you two looked at me today, like I was something to be cleaned up, like I was a problem the nice people shouldn't have to see. He took a breath. And you know what I learned? I learned that the people who treat you like dirt when you're down are the same people who will lick your boots the second you're up. They don't change. The only thing that changes is the size of your bank account. And I decided a long time ago that I would never give those people what they wanted from me, which was for me to become one of them. He looked at the dusty Harley, then back at Ethan and Vanessa. You wanted me to be ashamed of this bike, of these clothes, of this skin. He almost smiled. But this bike is the truest thing in this whole courtyard. This bike doesn't care how much money you have. It just wants to know if you can ride. Somewhere in the crowd, somebody started to clap. It was quiet, just one person. But it spread slow, then faster, and within seconds, half the courtyard was applauding the dirty old biker. Same people who'd been laughing at him 15 minutes before. Travis didn't acknowledge it. He found the sound almost as distasteful as the laughing had been because it was the same instinct the herd turning to face the new winner. He raised a hand and the clapping died. Don't, Travis said. You laughed when you thought he was right. Now you're clapping because you think I'm right. You're not better than him. You're just better at reading the room. He let that land. Real respect isn't a thing you give the powerful. Any coward can do that. Real respect is a thing you give a stranger before you know whether he can do anything for you. That's the whole game. That's the only thing that's ever mattered. The courtyard went silent again, and this time it was a chastened silence. The silence of 60 wealthy people who had just been told something true about themselves that they did not enjoy hearing. And then from the edge of the crowd, a voice spoke up, young, nervous, but steady. Mr. Reed, Travis turned. It was the security guard. The kid, Marcus 24, the one who'd shifted on his feet and looked like he wanted to say something and hadn't dared. Yes, son. Marcus swallowed hard. He was clearly terrified to be speaking at all with everyone watching with his manager, standing right there. I want to say for the record, when you first pulled in before any of this, I was the one who pointed you toward the guest lot, and I offered to watch your bike. He glanced at Pruitt, then back. I didn't know who you were either. My dad rode. He passed last year, and I saw your bike, and I thought that's somebody's somebody. You know, everybody's somebody to someone. He went red. That's all. Sorry, I'll go back to my post. Travis looked at the kid for a long moment. What's your name? Marcus, sir. Marcus Bell. Marcus, Travis nodded slowly. You offered to watch my bike. Yes, sir. For you knew I owned the place. I didn't know, sir. I had no idea. That's the point, son. Travis turned to the attorney. Daniel. Mr. Reed. What's a club general manager make salary full package the whole thing? Daniel didn't miss a beat. He'd worked for the man long enough to see where this was going. Depends on the property. For one of this size, somewhere north of 200. Good. Travis looked at Gerald Pruitt, whose face had gone slack with dawning horror. Gerald, you're done, effective right now. Collect your things and turn in your badge to Daniel on the way out. You'll get severance. I'm not a monster, and you've got a family of your own, I'd guess. But you will never manage another property of mine. And if you tell anyone you left for any reason other than cause, I'll make sure the whole industry knows the truth. Are we clear? Pruitt opened his mouth, looked at the attorneys, looked at the chairman of the board who would not meet his eyes, and understood that there was no appeal, no manager above this man, no one to complain to. The man in the cracked boots was the top of the mountain. Yes, sir, Pruitt whispered. Good. Travis turned back to Marcus, who looked like he might faint. Son, how'd you like to be the new general manager of the Silver Ridge Coastal Club? The kid's mouth fell open. Sir, I'm 24. I've been a security guard for 14 months. I wouldn't even know. You knew the most important thing, Travis said. You knew how to treat a stranger. The rest is paperwork. You'll have help, you'll learn, and you'll start at the salary Daniel just quoted, which I'm guessing is about 4 times what you're making now. He almost smiled. Your dad rode. He'd want you to take it. Don't insult him by saying no out of nerves. Marcus Bell stood there in the middle of the courtyard, 24 years old, with tears standing in his eyes, and for a second he couldn't speak at all. Then he managed in a cracked whisper, Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Travis said. That's why I picked you. And the courtyard, which had laughed and then clapped and then gone silent, now sat utterly still, watching a security guard get handed a life he never imagined, while the millionaire who'd been the toast of the club 20 minutes ago stood pale and shaking against his own. Rolls-Royce watching everything he thought he knew about the world come apart. Ethan Whitmore looked at the leather folder under the old biker's arm, the folder with his name on it, the folder that held the only thing standing between his family and the bottom. And he understood, with a clarity that felt like drowning, that he had personally, with his own loud, stupid, arrogant mouth, talked himself out of the rescue he'd been praying for. Mr. Reed, Ethan said, and his voice was barely a voice at all now. The folder? Please. Are you going to sign it? Travis Reed looked down at the folder. Then he looked up at Ethan Whitmore. And for a long, long moment, he said nothing at all. I'm going to do something I haven't done in 20 years, Travis said finally. I'm going to tell you the truth of all of it right here in front of everybody. And then I'm going to make my decision, and you're going to live with it. He handed the folder back to Daniel. Hold this. I'm not signing anything until I've said my piece. Ethan's heart, which had leapt at I'm going to do something, fell again. He didn't sign, he gave it back. The man gave it back. You said you have 62 employees, Travis began. Let me tell you about your 62 employees, Ethan, because I know more about your company than you think. My people don't bring me a deal until they've turned the whole thing inside out. He took a step closer. You haven't given your staff a raise in 3 years. You laid off 11 people last spring and kept your own salary at $400,000. You bought this, he nodded at the rolls, in March, right around the time payroll started bouncing. You want to talk to me about those 62 families? You've been bleeding them to keep up appearances for 2 years. A murmur went through the crowd. Ethan's face went from white to gray. That's the financials are more complicated than... They're not complicated, Travis said. They're simple. They're the simplest thing in the world. A man who's scared of looking poor will do anything, hurt anyone, spend money he doesn't have just to avoid being seen the way he saw me today. You laid off 11 people and bought a Rolls-Royce in the same quarter. That's not complicated, son. That's just sad. Vanessa, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. That's not fair. You don't know what we've been through. You don't know the pressure. The pressure, Travis repeated. To maintain a certain standing, Vanessa said. And even as the words came out, she seemed to hear how they sounded. People expect things. Our friends, there are expectations. You don't keep a Rolls because you're vain. You keep it because the day you sell it, everyone knows. Everyone knows you're slipping. And once they smell blood... She stopped. For the first time, Travis looked at her with something other than coldness. Something almost like understanding, which was worse because it came with pity. You're right, Travis said quietly. I don't know your pressure. I know a different one. I know what it's like to have nothing and be looked at like nothing. You know what it's like to have everything and be terrified of losing the way people look at you. He shook his head slowly. Lady, that's a prison. You built yourself a prison out of other people's eyes, and you've been living in it so long, you think the bars are the walls of a mansion. He paused. I almost feel sorry for you. Almost. Right up until the part where you waved your hand in front of your nose and called a stranger, poor to make your friends laugh. Vanessa flinched like she'd been slapped, and then to the surprise of everyone, most of all herself, she started to cry. Not the performance tears from before. Real ones, ugly ones. The kind that come when somebody names the thing you've been hiding from your whole life. I didn't used to be like this, she said, and her voice broke on it. I grew up in a town smaller than this parking lot. I waitressed. I I know what it's like to be the one people look through. She wiped her face smearing makeup. And the second I had money, I became the worst version of the people who used to look through me. I know that. I've known it for years, and I hate it. I hate. She couldn't finish. Ethan stared at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Vanessa. Shut up, Ethan. She didn't even look at him. Just for 1 minute in your life, shut up. She turned back to Travis. You don't owe us anything. You don't owe us a bailout. You don't owe us a second chance. You don't owe us your signature. We were cruel to you for no reason except that being cruel felt good, and we thought you couldn't fight back. There's no excuse for that. There's no complicated. Her voice dropped, we're just not very good people, and I'm tired of pretending we are. The courtyard was dead silent. Travis Reed studied her for a long moment. He'd spent 50 years reading men and women, and he could tell the difference between a confession and a tactic the way a jeweler can tell glass from diamond. And what he was looking at now was not a tactic. It was a woman watching her whole life come apart and for the first time not reaching for a lie to patch it. That, Travis said slowly, is the first true thing either of you has said all day. Ethan, sensing an opening, jumped on it. Yes, exactly. We're being honest. Now we're Mr. Reed. That has to count for something, doesn't it? Honesty, you value that. I can tell you value that. And just like that, Travis's face closed again. You see what he just did? Travis said, not to Ethan, but to Vanessa. To everyone. Your wife told the truth and bled doing it. And his very first instinct was to figure out how to use it. How to turn her honesty into leverage on me. He shook his head. She broke. You calculated. That's the difference between the two of you, and it's the whole difference in the world. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. Because it was true, and he knew it was true, and the knowing was a kind of nakedness he'd never felt before. Daniel, Travis said, what happens to Whitmore Holdings if I don't sign? Daniel consulted nothing. He knew the file cold. The bridge lender calls the loan Monday morning. They've got a confession of judgment on file. Mr. Whitmore signed it to get the bridge financing. They'll seize the operating accounts, foreclose on the 4 properties held as collateral, and liquidate. The company's gone by end of next week. Personal guarantees come into play after that. He glanced at Ethan. The houses, the cars, the personal accounts, all pledged, all gone. Ethan made a small sound. And the 62 employees, Travis asked. Severance is unfunded. They get whatever's left after the secured creditors, which is nothing. They lose their jobs and their last 2 paychecks. Daniel paused. It's a hard landing for them. They didn't do anything wrong. Travis nodded slowly. He'd known all this. He'd known it riding through the desert, but he wanted Ethan to hear it out loud in front of witnesses in plain English. So here's where we are, Travis said. If I walk away, you lose everything, which I won't pretend I'd lose sleep over. But 62 people who never insulted me, who never even met me, lose everything too. And I would lose sleep over that. I've been one of those 62 people. I've gotten the call that says, don't come in Monday, there's no Monday. He looked at the Harley. So I'm not going to punish them for your sins. That's not justice. That's just me being as careless with people's lives as you've been. A flicker of hope crossed Ethan's face. But I'm also not going to hand you back the keys to a company so you can do it all over again. Travis continued. So here's what's going to happen, and it's not a negotiation. You don't get to counter. You nod, or you walk into the fire Monday morning. Anything, Ethan breathed. Anything, yes. I'm going to sign it, Travis said. Reed Capital acquires Whitmore Holdings. The employees keep their jobs, every one of them, and the 11 you laid off last spring get offered their jobs back at a raise. The buildings stay, the company survives. He let that hang for 1 second, just long enough for relief to start flooding Ethan's face, and then he took it away. And you, Ethan, are out, completely out. You don't run it, you don't sit on the board, you don't have an office. Your name comes off the building by Friday. Reed Capital owns 100% and installs new management. You walk away with your personal guarantees released, your houses, your cars, you keep those because your wife shouldn't be on the street for your mistakes, but you walk away with no company and no title and no power over a single human being who works there, ever again. Ethan's mouth worked. You'd buy the company, but cut me out completely. That's right. But it's my company. I built it. My name is on it. You built it on debt, and you ran it into the ground, and you treated the people who run the place better than you do, like furniture, Travis said flatly. You didn't build a company. You built a costume that says successful businessman. And you wore it everyone around so people would look at you the way you wanted to be looked at. And the second somebody didn't play along, he tapped his own chest. You couldn't stand it. The company was never the point, Ethan. The applause was the point, and I'm taking away the applause. The cruelty of it, the precision of it landed on Ethan harder than any threat of bankruptcy, because Travis had seen straight through to the thing Ethan had never admitted, even to himself. He didn't love the company, he loved being the man who owned it. And Travis was going to let him keep his house and his car and take away the only thing he'd ever actually wanted. You can't do this, Ethan said, and there was a wild edge in it now. You can't just, there are laws, there's a process, I have rights as the owner. I'll fight it, I'll get lawyers. With what money? Travis asked mildly. You're 3 weeks from broke. I have a building full of lawyers. You'll be in litigation for 2 years, you'll lose. And at the end of it, you'll have spent the houses I'm offering to let you keep on legal fees, and you'll still lose the company. Or, he spread his hands. You sign, you keep your home, you keep your wife in her jewelry, and you go figure out who you are without a title for the first time in your adult life. He paused. I'm not being cruel, Ethan. I'm being merciful, and you can't even tell the difference. That's how far gone you are. Vanessa put a hand on her husband's arm. Ethan, take it. Her voice was hollow and exhausted. He's giving us the house. He's giving the employees their jobs. He's giving you a way out that doesn't end with us sleeping in the rolls. Take it. Take it. It was never yours, Vanessa said, and the words came out like something tearing. It was the bank's. It's been the bank's for 2 years, and you knew it, and you kept buying things to hide it. Take the deal, Ethan. For once in your life, lose with a little grace. Ethan looked at his wife. He looked at the attorneys. He looked at the chairman of the board who wouldn't meet his eyes, at the 60 guests who'd watched the whole thing, at the young security guard who was about to become his replacement's boss, at the dirty old biker who held his entire life in a leather folder. And the last of the fight went out of him. Okay, Ethan whispered. Okay, I'll sign. Good. Travis turned to Daniel. Put together the revised terms. 100% acquisition, all employees retain the 11 get callbacks with the raise. Whitmore's personal guarantees released in exchange for his full and final withdrawal from any operating or ownership role. He signs a non-compete and a non-disparagement, and so do we. Nobody trashes anybody. This just quietly happened. Get it drafted today. Yes, sir. And the new GM here, Travis nodded at Marcus, who was still standing, frozen in disbelief. I want him paired with someone good from corporate for 90 days. Real training, not thrown in the deep end. He's got the heart. Give him the tools. Of course. It was done. It was by any measure an extraordinary act of mercy dressed up as a business transaction. 62 jobs saved, a family kept off the street. A kid's life changed, and a punishment that fit the crime. So exactly, it was almost surgical. The crowd could feel it. The mood had shifted from spectacle to something closer to awe. And that was the moment everything changed. Because the chairman of the board, a tall gray man named Howard Lassiter, who had stood silent through the entire scene, holding nothing, saying nothing, finally stepped forward, and he was not looking at Travis with the awe everyone else was. He was looking at the leather folder in Daniel's hands with something that, if you'd been watching closely, looked a great deal like panic. Travis, Lassiter said, a word, privately, before anyone signs anything. Travis turned to him. Howard, what's the matter? You've been quiet. I think, Lassiter's eyes flicked to Daniel, to the folder, to the crowd. I think there's something about the Whitmore file you need to know before you put your name on it. Something that didn't make it into the version your team prepared. He swallowed. Something I should have told you 8 months ago. The courtyard, which had begun to relax, went rigid again. Travis looked at his board chairman for a long, slow moment. Howard Lassiter had been with him for 14 years. Howard Lassiter did not panic. Howard Lassiter did not pull man aside in front of a crowd unless the building was on fire. Daniel, Travis said quietly, not taking his eyes off Lassiter. Don't let that folder out of your hands. Yes, sir. Howard. Travis's voice had dropped into something very calm and very cold. Whatever it is you're going to say it right here out loud. Because the last time somebody in my organization wanted a private word before signing, it cost me $9 million and a man I trusted. He folded his arms. So, what's in the Whitmore file that you should have told me 8 months ago? Howard Lassiter's face had gone the color of paper. He looked at Ethan Whitmore, who was staring at him now with dawning, horrified confusion, and then back at Travis. It's not just Whitmore Holdings that's about to go under, Lassiter said. And the bridge lender that's about to call the loan Monday morning. He took a breath, isn't a stranger. You know exactly who it is, and so do I. Say it plain, Howard, Travis said. We're past the part where anybody gets to be careful with their words. Howard Lassiter wet his lips. 14 years he'd worked for this man, and in 14 years he had never once felt the floor tilt the way it was tilting now. The bridge lender, he said, the one with the confession of judgment, the one that's going to seize Whitmore's accounts Monday. He paused. It's Meridian Credit Partners. Travis went very still. The name meant nothing to the crowd. It meant nothing to Ethan, who was looking back and forth between the two men with the dumb confusion of someone watching a conversation in a language he didn't speak. But it meant something to Travis Reed. Daniel saw his boss's jaw tighten, and Daniel, who knew where everybody in the company was buried, felt his own stomach drop because Daniel knew that name too. Meridian, Travis repeated. Yes, Howard. Travis's voice had gone soft, which was 1,000 times worse than if he'd shouted. Reed Capital owns 60% of Meridian Credit Partners. We bought the stake 4 years ago. I sit on their lending committee. I sit on it. I know, Lassiter said quietly. So you're telling me, Travis took a step toward his chairman, that the predatory bridge loan that's been strangling this company, the confession of judgment that's about to put 62 people out of work Monday morning, the trap that turned a survivable cash crunch into a death sentence. His voice dropped to almost nothing that came out of a company I control. Yes, Lassiter said. The courtyard didn't make a sound. How, Travis said. How does my own lending arm write a loan like that, a confession of judgment? Howard, we don't do those. I've got a written policy against them. How does that happen without it crossing my desk? And here Howard Lassiter did the bravest and most foolish thing he'd done in 14 years. He told the truth. Because I approved it, Lassiter said. I sit on the Meridian committee in your place when you're traveling. You were in Singapore. The deal came through. It was profitable. The terms were aggressive, but the borrower signed willingly, and his voice cracked. I waived your policy. I told myself it was one deal. I told myself you wouldn't care about one mid-sized real estate borrower in California. I approved it, and I didn't tell you, and then 8 months later, your acquisitions team flagged Whitmore as a turnaround target without realizing the loan choking it was ours. He stopped. I've been sick about it for weeks. I came down here today to tell you, and then all this happened, and I lost my nerve. But you can't sign that folder without knowing. Because if you acquire Whitmore Holdings while Meridian holds that loan alone, I approved against your own written policy, and it ever comes out, it's self-dealing. It's a conflict of interest big enough to put your name in the papers. It could trigger a regulatory review of the whole Meridian acquisition. It could cost you the bank. Travis Reed stood absolutely still. For the first time all afternoon, through the insults, the threats, the humiliation, the slow reveal, the calm had gone out of his face. Not into anger, into something deeper. The look of a man who has just discovered that the rot he'd come to fix was in part his own. So let me understand, Travis said slowly. I rode 400 miles to save 62 jobs from a debt trap. And the debt trap was set by my own house, by my own people, with my own money, while I wasn't looking. He turned and looked at the dusty Harley like it might tell him something. I spent 20 minutes lecturing that man. He gestured at Ethan without looking at him. About character. About how the way you treat people when you think nobody important is watching is the only honest thing about you. He let out a slow breath. And the whole time my own company was doing to 62 strangers exactly what he did to me. Except we did it with a contract instead of a sneer. Travis, Lassiter started. Don't. Travis held up a hand. Just give me a second. He was quiet for a long moment. And then he did something nobody expected. He turned to Ethan Whitmore, the man he'd spent half an hour dismantling, and he said in a completely different voice, the bridge loan, the terms, Did anyone explain to you what a confession of judgment actually was when you signed it? Ethan blinked, thrown by the change. I know, not really. They said it was standard. My company was 12 days from missing payroll. I'd been turned down by 4 banks. Meridian was the only one who'd moved fast. He swallowed. I signed 40 pages in an afternoon. I didn't have a lawyer look at it. I couldn't afford the delay. They knew that. I think that was the point. That was exactly the point, Travis said quietly. That's how those loans work. You find a man who's drowning and you sell him an anchor and you call it a life preserver. He looked at Ethan with something that had shifted, not warmth, but a grim recognition. I'm not absolving you. You're still a man who humiliated a stranger for sport, and that's still on you. But the trap that's killing your company, that wasn't you being a bad businessman. And that was my company being a bad lender. And I didn't know it until 30 seconds ago. The crowd was hanging on every word. The story had turned inside out. The villain who'd been getting his comeuppance was now partly a victim of the very man dispensing the justice. Howard, Travis said, turning back to his chairman, you approved it, you hid it, you let me ride into this blind. For 14 years, I have trusted you with everything. His voice didn't rise, but it sharpened to a point. Why, you've got more money than you'll ever spend. You don't need a profitable bridge loan. So why did you waive my policy and bury it? Lassiter's composure finally broke. Because I wanted the quarter to look good, he said, and the shame in it was total. We were soft in Q2. Meridian's numbers were going to drag the whole report. And I knew if I waited for you to fly back from Singapore, you'd kill the deal on principle, and we'd miss the target, and the board I'd look like I couldn't run the place without you holding my hand. He laughed, a horrible broken sound. I did the exact thing you just spent half an hour describing. I hurt a stranger to protect how I'd look to the people whose opinion I cared about. I'm no different than him. He pointed a shaking finger at Ethan. I'm worse. He insulted you to a crowd. I betrayed you in a boardroom and let you find out in public. And there it was, the twist that turned the whole afternoon on its head. The biker had come to teach a rich man about character, and the rich man's sin turned out to be the exact same sin festering at the top of the biker's own empire. Vanity, the terror of how you look, the willingness to grind a stranger to dust to protect your own reflection. It ran through Ethan and it ran through Howard Lassiter, and the only difference was the size of the office where it lived. Travis understood all of this in the space of a few seconds, and the crowd watched him understand it. Daniel, Travis said. Sir, 2 things. First, Meridian. I want every confession of judgment loan they've written in the last 4 years on my desk by Monday. Every single one. I want to know how many other Whitmores are out there choking on an anchor my company sold them. We're going to unwind every one of them that we can, and we're going to eat the loss because it's a loss I should never have let happen. He paused. And we're shutting down that lending product permanently. I don't care how profitable it is. We're done preying on drowning men. Yes, sir. Daniel was writing fast. Second, the Whitmore acquisition. Travis turned to the leather folder. We don't acquire it, not the way it's drafted. He looked at Ethan. Because the loan we'd be acquiring it through is illegitimate. My own company set a trap and I'm not going to profit off springing it. Here's what happens instead. He took a breath. Meridian forgives the bridge loan, the whole thing. We write it off as the mistake it was. Whitmore Holdings goes back to where it was 12 days before you signed those 40 pages, a company with a cash crunch and too much debt, but a company that's alive and a company that's yours. Ethan's mouth fell open. You're giving it back. You're not taking the company. I'm not taking your company, Travis said, because I never had a clean right to take it in the first place. The leverage I was going to use was leverage my own people created by breaking my own rules. A man who lectures about character doesn't get to keep the win when he finds out the game was rigged in his favor. He shook his head. I'd be exactly what I accused you of being. The crowd murmured. Vanessa had both hands over her mouth, but Travis wasn't finished and Ethan's flood of relief was about to hit a wall. That doesn't mean you walk away clean, Travis said. Forgiving the predatory loan doesn't fix the real problem, which is that you're still bleeding 62 people to pay for a Rolls Royce and an image. So here's the second half. I'm not buying Whitmore Holdings, but Reed Capital is going to make an investment in it, a real one on fair terms, the kind we should have offered in the first place. Enough capital to stabilize payroll and get you through the downturn. In exchange, we take a minority stake and 2 board seats. You stay CEO. He held up one finger. But you stay CEO on a leash. The 11 you laid off get called back. Nobody else gets laid off without board approval. Your salary gets cut to 200 until the company's healthy, and the difference goes into an employee fund. And the roles, he almost smiled. The roles get sold and you buy something a man who just laid off 11 people should be driving. Are we clear? Ethan stared at him. He had walked into this afternoon expecting to lose everything. He had spent the last hour certain he had, and now the dirty old biker he'd insulted was handing him back his company, his title, his future with conditions designed not to punish him, but to make him into the kind of man who deserved to keep them. Why? Ethan said. His voice was barely working. Why would you do that? After what I called you, I told you to go back to your trailer park. I tried to have your bike impounded. I tried to have you arrested. Why are you saving me? And Travis Reed gave the answer that more than anything else that afternoon told the crowd exactly what kind of man they'd been laughing at an hour ago. Because somebody did it for me once, Travis said quietly. The courtyard went still. 1983, he said. I was 25. I had a little welding shop and a dream too big for it, and I took a loan from a man who turned out to be exactly like Meridian. Confession of judgment. The works. And when I couldn't pay, he came to take it all, the shop, my truck, the tools my father left me. Travis's voice had gone somewhere far away. And another man stepped in, a man I'd done one small kindness for years before when he was down, and I had no idea who he'd become. He bought my debt out from under the loan shark, and he handed it to me, and he said, "Pay me back when you can, and don't you ever forget what this felt like." He looked at Ethan. I paid him back in 4 years, and I never forgot what it felt like. And I built everything I have on the back of that one man's mercy to a stranger who couldn't do anything for him. He paused. So when you ask me why I'd save a man who spit on me, that's why. Because the man who saved me didn't do it because I deserved it. He did it because he decided what kind of man he was going to be. And it had nothing to do with me at all. Ethan Whitmore was crying now. The arrogant millionaire who'd held court by his Rolls Royce an hour ago stood in the middle of the courtyard with tears running down his face, and they were not the tears of a man who'd been beaten. They were the tears of a man who'd been seen all the way down and handed grace anyway. I don't deserve it, Ethan said. No, Travis agreed. You don't. That's the whole point of mercy. If you deserved it, it'd just be a transaction. He turned to Daniel. Draft the investment terms. Tonight. And get Meridian's general counsel on the phone. I want that loan forgiven before the markets open Monday, before they can move on those accounts. On it, sir. Travis turned back to his chairman, and the warmth drained out of his face again. Howard. Lassiter straightened. He knew what was coming, and he'd known it from the moment he opened his mouth. Yes, you're a good man who did a coward's thing, Travis said. I've known you 14 years, and I'd have trusted you with my life right up until an hour ago. And the worst part is you didn't do it for money. You did it because you were scared of how a soft quarter would make you look. He shook his head slowly. You're sitting on my board telling other people how to run honest businesses, and you waived my own ethics policy to juice a number. Howard, I can't unsee that. I know, Lassiter said. I'm not going to fight it. I came here to confess because I couldn't live with it anymore. Whatever you decide, Here's what I decide, Travis said. You resign from the board. Tonight, effective immediately. He paused. And then tomorrow you go to work as a regular employee. No title, no committee on the team that unwinds every bad loan Meridian wrote. Everyone. You're going to spend the next year personally calling every Whitmore we trapped and telling them you're forgiving their debt. You're going to look each one of them in the eye, and you're going to know exactly what you did, not as punishment. Travis's voice dropped. As penance, because you're a good man, Howard, and a good man doesn't need to be destroyed. He needs to be put back in front of the people he hurt until he remembers who he was supposed to be. Lassiter's eyes filled. That's Travis, that's more than fair. That's more than It's the same thing the man in 1983 did for me, Travis said. He didn't destroy the loan shark. He just made me pay attention to what mercy costs, so I'd spend it carefully for the rest of my life. He almost smiled. I'm not going to throw away 14 good years over one bad month, but you're going to earn your way back every single day. The courtyard had gone from a place of spectacle to something almost like a church. 60 wealthy people who'd come for champagne stood in total silence, watching a man in cracked boots dispense a kind of justice. None of them had ever seen justice that punished without destroying, that forgave without excusing, that somehow held everyone, including himself, to the exact same impossible standard. And then Travis turned finally to the two people who'd started it all. Ethan, wrecked and weeping and saved. Vanessa, who hadn't said a word in a long time, who was watching her husband cry with an expression of dawning hope and terror. "You too," Travis said. "You get your company back, and a real investment, and a second chance most people never get. But understand me." His voice went flat and serious. "I'm going to be watching. 2 board seats. I'll know how you treat the 11 you bring back. I'll know how you treat the receptionist and the janitor and the man who pumps gas into your sensible new car. Because the deal I just gave you isn't really about the money." He stepped closer. "It's a test. I'm betting on the idea that a man can change, that the right kind of mercy at the right moment can turn somebody around. People bet on me once when I didn't deserve it." He held Ethan's eyes. "Don't make me regret betting on you. Because I promise you this, the next time you call a stranger too poor to breathe your air, I will hear about it, and there won't be a third chance." Ethan nodded, unable to speak, and it was Vanessa who finally found words. She stepped forward, mascara-ruined hands shaking, and she did the one thing nobody in that courtyard had done all afternoon. She didn't thank him for the money. She didn't grovel. She looked the dirty old biker in the eye, and she said simply, "What was his name?" Travis blinked. "Whose name?" "The man," Vanessa said. "In 1983, the one who saved you, the one who started all of this." Her voice trembled. "I want to know his name, because I think the only way we ever pay you back is to do for somebody else what he did for you. And I'd like to know whose name we'd be carrying when we do it." For the first time all afternoon, Travis Reed looked genuinely caught off guard. Something moved across his weathered face, surprise, and then something softer underneath it, something that looked almost like grief. He was quiet for a long moment. "His name," Travis said slowly, "was Walter Whitmore." And the blood drained out of Ethan's face for an entirely new reason. "He had a son," Travis said, looking at Ethan now with an expression nobody could read. "A boy he was raising alone after his wife passed. He used to talk about him all the time. Said the kid was going to do big things someday. Said he hoped the boy would turn out kind." Travis's voice was very quiet now. "Walter died 16 years ago. I tried to find the son to pay it forward, to do for him what his father did for me. But the trail went cold. Different last name on some records, and move out of state. I never could track him down." He paused. "Until my acquisitions team flagged a struggling real estate company 8 months ago, and the founder's name was Whitmore." The entire courtyard held its breath. "I didn't say anything," Travis said softly, "because I wasn't sure. Whitmore's a common enough name, and the man I'd come to investigate was by every account a vain, arrogant, careless businessman. And that didn't sound like anything Walter's boy would grow up to be." He looked at Ethan and his eyes were wet now. "So I rode down here to see for myself, to look the man in the eye before I decided anything. And I parked my bike and you took one look at me and you called me too poor to be here." Ethan Whitmore had stopped breathing entirely. "So I have to ask you, son," Travis said, and his voice broke on the word son. "Your father, Walter Whitmore, the welder's friend who saved a stranger's life in 1983. He swallowed hard. "Is that your father? Are you Walter's boy?" Ethan Whitmore's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. When the words finally came, they came in pieces. "My father's name was Walter," he said. He ran a small machine shop in Bakersfield. He raised me alone after my mom died. I was 4. Ethan's voice was shaking now, every word a struggle. "He used to tell a story, when I was a kid, about a young man with a welding shop who did him a kindness when nobody else would years before, and how he never forgot it, and how one day he paid it forward to a stranger who was about to lose everything." Tears were streaming down his face. "I thought it was just a story, a bedtime story, about being good to people. I never knew if it was real." "It was real," Travis whispered. "I was the young man. He was the stranger I helped before either of us had anything. And then 20 years later, when I was the one drowning, he was the one who saved me back." His own voice broke completely now. "Your father didn't just save my business, son. He saved my life. I was going to in 1983, when I lost everything I had a bad night, a real bad night. And Walter Whitmore showing up the next morning with my debt paid off is the only reason I'm standing here. Your father is the reason every single thing I've built exists." The courtyard was utterly silent. 60 people who had come for champagne stood frozen witnessing something none of them would ever forget. Ethan's knees buckled, and this time Vanessa caught him, and the two of them held each other up. "He talked about you," Ethan choked out. "Not by name. He never said your name. He said the young welder. He said you were the best man he ever knew. He said you taught him what it meant to be decent before you had any reason to be." Ethan was sobbing openly now, decades of something cracking open all at once. "He died when I was 23. Heart attack. Sudden. And the last real conversation we ever had, he told me." Ethan couldn't finish. "What did he tell you?" Travis asked gently. "He told me he was proud of me," Ethan said. "And he told me to be kind to people who couldn't do anything for me. He said that was the whole measure of a man." He said it over and over. Ethan's face crumpled. "And I forgot. The second I had money, I forgot every single word. I became exactly the kind of man my father would have been ashamed of." And today he looked up at Travis devastated. "Today I called the one person on earth who loved my father most too poor to be here. I spat on the man my father saved. I spat on his whole legacy, and I didn't even know it." And here was the thing that broke the entire courtyard wide open, the thing that turned a story about arrogance into something nobody present would ever fully recover from, because it meant that Walter Whitmore's kindness given freely to a stranger in 1983 had traveled 43 years through time to arrive at exactly the moment his own son needed saving most. The old man had thrown his bread on the water half a lifetime ago, and it had come back to rescue the boy he'd raised through the hands of the very man he'd once rescued. Travis Reed walked across the courtyard, slowly, past the attorneys, past the chairman, past the white Rolls Royce, and he stopped in front of Walter Whitmore's son, and he looked at him for a long moment with tears running into the deep lines of his sunburned face. "I've been looking for you for 16 years, Travis said. "I made a promise at your father's grave. I never could find you, and then you found me by being cruel enough to make me look you in the eye." He let out a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob. Your father would have laughed at that. He had a wicked sense of humor. He'd have said, "God's got a sense of timing nobody can argue with." And then Travis Reed did something that none of the 60 wealthy guests, none of the attorneys, none of the staff had expected. He pulled Ethan Whitmore, the arrogant millionaire who'd humiliated him an hour before, into his arms, and he held him the way you hold a son you've waited a lifetime to meet. And Ethan, who had spent his whole adult life building walls out of money and status and contempt, broke down completely against the dusty leather vest, weeping for a father he'd lost and a man he'd wronged, and a self he'd buried so long ago he'd forgotten it ever existed. "I'm sorry," Ethan kept saying into the old man's shoulder. I'm so sorry, Bung." "I know," Travis murmured. "I know you are. That's how I know you're his." When they finally pulled apart, the entire courtyard was weeping too. Even Daniel, the lead attorney who'd seen everything in 30 years of practice, was wiping his eyes. Even Howard Lassiter, who'd come to confess his own sin, stood watching with tears on his face, understanding for the first time the full shape of the man he'd betrayed. Travis turned to the crowd, and when he spoke, his voice had recovered its steadiness, but something underneath it had changed forever. "You all watched me get insulted today," he said, "and some of you laughed, and then some of you clapped when you thought I'd won. And I told you that wasn't any better." He looked around at them. "But here's what I want you to take home tonight. Every single thing that just happened, the company saved the jobs, protected the loans, forgiven the second chances, none of it happened because of money. I have all the money in the world, and it couldn't have made one bit of this happen." He paused. "It happened because 43 years ago, a poor welder in Bakersfield decided to be kind to a stranger who couldn't do a thing for him. That's it. That's the whole engine. One act of kindness given without expecting anything back, and it's still saving lives almost half a century later in a courtyard full of people who never even met the man." He let that settle. "You can't buy that," Travis said. "You can't fake it. You can't perform it for a crowd. You either do it when nobody's watching and nobody can repay you, or you don't do it at all. And the way you treat the man you think is nobody." He gestured at himself, at the cracked boots, the worn vest, the dusty Harley. That's the only honest report card you'll ever get on the kind of person you actually are. It was Vanessa who moved first. She walked over to the young security guard Marcus, who'd been standing near the wall this whole time, overwhelmed his life, already changed twice over in one afternoon. And she did the thing she'd spent her whole adult life believing was beneath her. She held out her hand. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything you watched today, for who we were when you met us." Her voice was steady now, cleaner than it had been all afternoon. "You offered to watch a stranger's bike because your dad rode and because everybody's somebody to someone. That's the kind of person I used to want to be before I let money turn me into something else." She shook his hand. "Congratulations on the new job. You earned it the only way that counts." Marcus, 24 years old and barely holding it together, shook her hand and managed, "Thank you, ma'am." And Travis Reed watched that, watched the woman who'd waved her hand in front of her nose and called him poor now, humbling herself before a security guard. And he knew in the deep place where he'd spent 50 years reading people that the bet he was about to make on Walter's son and his wife was not a foolish one. They could be saved. The decency Walter had tried to plant in his boy hadn't died. It had just been buried under a mountain of fear and money in other people's eyes. And mountains Travis knew better than anyone could be moved. That evening, after the attorneys had gone and the deal terms were drafted and the guests had drifted away, changed, Travis Reed did not leave. He sat at the best oceanfront table in the club, still in his dusty boots, still smelling of gasoline and 400 miles of desert, still looking exactly like the man they'd mocked at 2 o'clock that afternoon. And he asked Ethan and Vanessa to sit with him. For 3 hours, the old biker told them about Walter, about the man Ethan had only known as a father who turned out to have been so much more, a quiet, funny, fiercely principled man who'd given away kindness like it was free because he believed it was. Travis told stories Ethan had never heard. He told him about the night Walter saved him, the exact words his father had used, the way he'd refused to take a dime of interest. He told him things that gave Ethan back pieces of his father he thought he'd lost forever. And somewhere in the third hour, Ethan Whitmore said the truest thing he'd said in 20 years. "I don't want the company anymore," he said quietly. "I mean, I'll run it. I'll do everything you said, the raises, the callbacks, the salary cut, all of it. But I don't want it the way I wanted it this morning." He looked out at the water. "This morning I wanted it because it made people look at me a certain way. And I just found out that the thing I should have wanted my whole life was to be the kind of man my father was. And he never had a Rolls Royce. He never had a club membership. He had a machine shop and a son and a story he told at bedtime about being good to strangers." Ethan's voice thickened. "And he was richer than I'll ever be. I just couldn't see it." Travis Reed smiled then, a real one, the first full smile of the whole long day. "Now you sound like Walter's boy," he said. The deal closed within the week exactly as Travis had laid it out, and then better. The predatory bridge loan was forgiven. The 11 laid-off employees came back to raises and an apology. The Rolls-Royce was sold and the proceeds went into the employee fund. Reed Capital's investment stabilized the company, and within 2 years, Whitmore Holdings was not only solvent, but thriving, run by a man. His employees no longer feared a man who learned every one of their names, a man who'd taken to keeping a photograph of his father on his desk where he'd see it every single morning. Howard Lassiter spent the next year exactly as Travis had sentenced him to, calling every borrower Meridian had trapped forgiving debt, looking each one in the eye. He came back to the board eventually. A quieter man, a better one. He never again confused how a thing looked with what a thing was. Marcus Bell turned out to be the best general manager the Silver Ridge Coastal Club had ever had, and he kept his father's old riding gloves in his desk drawer, and whenever a guest treated a member of his staff like furniture, he thought of a dusty old biker in a single afternoon that had rearranged the entire shape of his life. And Travis Reed kept riding. He never bought a nicer bike, never traded the leather vest for a suit, never stopped looking like exactly the kind of man wealthy people mistook for trouble. Because the disguise was never a disguise. It was the truth. It was the welding shop, in the repo trucks, in the bad night in 1980, and the stranger who saved him all of it, worn right out in the open where anyone with eyes to see could see it. The rich people just never bothered to look. I went to visit Walter Whitmore's grave that fall, with Walter's son riding beside him on a brand new motorcycle Ethan had bought and learned to handle himself. The two of them stood there a long time, the man Walter saved and the boy Walter raised finally connected after 43 years, By an act of kindness neither of them had been there to see. I kept my promise, Walt, Travis said quietly to the headstone. Took me 16 years and a punch to the gut to find him, but I kept it. Your boy's gonna be all right. He put a weathered hand on the cold stone. You were the best man I ever knew, and he's going to be just like you. I'll see to it. Ethan, standing beside him, could not speak. He just put his hand on the headstone next to Travis's father and son savior together, and the wind came up off the hills and moved through them both. The story spread the way these things do. People told it for years afterward, the day a billionaire rode a dusty Harley into a country club and got called too poor to belong, and how it turned out he owned everything, and how the man who mocked him turned out to be the son of the man who'd once saved his life. They told it as a story about wealth and humiliation and a rich man getting what he deserved. But that was never what it was about. It was about a poor welder in Bakersfield who decided with nothing to gain and no one watching to be kind to a stranger. And how that one decision rippled forward through 43 years and saved a company, rescued 62 families, redeemed a lost son, humbled. A proud woman lifted up a young man who deserved it and brought two grieving men together at a graveside to honor a third who'd been gone for 16 years. Money built the club, money bought the cars, money paid for the champagne and the linen and the white Rolls Royce gleaming in the lot. But money never saved a single soul in that courtyard. Kindness did. It always had. It always will. And the most dangerous man in any room will never be the one with the loudest voice or the deepest pockets or the most expensive watch. It will always, always be the quiet one in the dusty boots, the one nobody respected at first glance, who learned long ago that the truest measure of a man is not what he can buy, but how he treats the people who can do nothing for him in return. Travis Reed learned that from a welder named Walter Whitmore. And in the end, that lesson was worth more than every dollar he ever made.